The following is a hockey podcast out of Vancouver and Surrey, British Columbia. It'll only consist of a lot of puck talk and even more BS, or in actual words, banter and satire. Enjoy, and as always, go Canucks go.
Reportedly, J.T. Miller was almost traded to the New York Rangers, but could the New Jersey Devils make more sense as a trade partner? Let's get into it on the crossover here. It's Locked On Canucks and it's Locked On Devils coming up now.
Your Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All righty now, what is up, New Jersey and also Vancouver? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here at the Locked On Network and also the Locked On Canucks podcast. I'm your host, college hockey play-by-play announcer, Devils Rider Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credentialed media member, Trey Matthews. There's a lot of drama happening in Vancouver, and I talked about it in a recent episode. But here to give some more insight is my colleague, Trevor Beggs, over at Locked On Canucks. He is also a part-time credentialed media member for the Daily Hive Vancouver and Offside. Trevor, I don't think we've ever interacted, but I felt as though now is a good time to connect to talk about all things New Jersey and also Vancouver.
Yeah, Trey, nice to connect with you here. You know, you're one of the guys setting the standard here at Locked On Canucks, man, keeping the culture going. And it's also easy to keep the culture going when you got a pretty damn exciting hockey team over there in New Jersey.
Hey, I could say the same thing about Vancouver. I saw you guys in the playoffs last year. Respectfully, you didn't last long, but it was still entertaining. Love seeing Quinn Hughes try to lead the way. And hey, we got to support one Hughes brother to another.
Yeah, no, straight up. And hey, I will say the Canucks were the fifth last team standing. Okay. I think the Devils were in a similar spot 2 years ago, getting ousted in Game 7 of the second round. But obviously, I think both franchises have their sights on bigger goals.
It didn't go to Game 7 with the Hurricanes. The Devils were gentlemen swept in the second round. It was they were out in 5 games.
I'm thinking of round 1, aren't I?
Round 1 against the Rangers. That 7 games overcame a 2-0 deficit, but that was a couple years ago. Let's talk about the present. The name of the game for the Devils is that they need something to bolster their bottom 6. Now, when looking at their bottom 6, there aren't that many consistent contributors. You're going to get someone like Paul Cotter, who's not really going to show up in the score sheet all that often, but he's very physical. Eric Haula is out with injury. Curtis Lazar, he's not really going to contribute offensively. Tomas Tatar, he's not repeating the same success that he saw a couple years ago. Nathan Bastian, a lot of people want him out of town. It's been a complete train wreck when it comes to finding consistent scoring on the bottom 6. Now, here's the thing. Devils discourse have their eyes set on 2 possible targets. But the thing is, both these players would not be on the Devils' bottom 6. They would be on the Devils' top 6, but they're looking for any sorts of positive reinforcement. And that is J.T. Miller and Elias Pettersson. Now, before we talk about the situation and the quote-unquote beef with Pettersson and Miller, I gave my insight as to what's happening in New Jersey. Can you tell me the insight as to what's going on in Vancouver?
Yeah, with J.T. Miller and Elias Pettersson, it seems to have picked up a lot of smoke, a lot of fire here in Vancouver. And I will say this, and I've said it before on our show, Every Dayers Know, a lot of it is truly just smoke. But that being said, there is something there, because when there's this much smoke, there's got to be something there. And when it pertains to J.T. Miller and Elias Pettersson, I don't know if there's some big old beef that's causing a rift in the locker room necessarily, but just from being around those guys for the past couple of years, I can tell you, and I think everyone knows, that they are very different personalities, right? They're both, you get to this level, everyone's a very confident athlete, and Pettersson's got this, maybe more of a quiet cockiness, and JT Miller, of course, is more of your old school, raw, in your face kind of guy. And now you've had Brad Richardson, former Canuck, come out and said Miller's been too hard on Pettersson. Boudreau adding some more smoke to the fire. So there is something there. But we all have, short vision when it comes to these situations, because Elias Pettersson and J.T. Miller had succeeded in Vancouver for a long time. There's a reason why both players were signed to long-term contracts. And, I truly do believe, a lot of people saying like, well, why would they sign long-term if there's beef? Probably because the beef maybe isn't as big as people are making out to be. Now, I think another wrinkle to the situation is J.T. Miller 10-game leave for personal reasons earlier this season, and no one knows exactly what happened. It did come after he was benched by Rick Tocchet, so obviously there's some rumors going on about that as well. But the fact of the matter is, JT Miller hasn't been the same player this season. He scored on a goalie in one game since October. He's got a couple empty netters, and he had a 2-goal game against Sam Montembeault of Montreal. Before that, he hadn't scored since he scored on Tristan Jarry back in late October. So he hasn't been the same player. Elias Pettersson hasn't been the same player for almost a calendar year now. He was the player of the month last January, and then he kind of fell off the wagon after the All-Star break last year. So, I think the best scenario for the Canucks is that these guys just figure it out, because they've both proven to be two of the most dangerous offensive weapons in the league. But it's been a troubling stretch where both guys have looked more like second liners than superstars.
Now, Elliot Friedman came out recently and he talked about the situation in Vancouver, and he basically laid out 3 possible outcomes, which is both of them are going to be dealt business as usual. No one's going to be dealt, or the Canucks are just going to feel it out a little bit, as in they'll put offers out, but it doesn't mean that the trade talks are going to elevate, if you know what I mean. So that's basically the case for any team. But Elliot Friedman is basically adding fuel to the fire, saying that maybe the Canucks will entertain trading Miller or Pettersson. Now, here's the thing, and I'm glad you brought it up. Contracts. Pettersson is set to become an unrestricted free agent not until 2032. He's being paid annually $11.6 million. JT Miller won't become an unrestricted free agent until 2030. He's being paid annually $8 million. Why on earth would the Canucks even entertain trading away these two players when both of them have a few years remaining? You don't have to make a move right now.
I think that's exactly the point, Trey. And, Elliot Friedman, he sure loves to stir the pot. Sometimes stirring the pot by saying a whole lot of nothing. Either they're both going to stay, they're both going to go, or one of them's going to go. Okay, what are the other options there, Elliot? But, the fact of the matter is, with Pettersson and Miller, the Canucks shouldn't be in a rush to trade either one of them. I think there is this media pressure, I guess, if you want to call it that. I don't even want to call it just media pressure. It's the fan base in general. Like, the Canucks fan base is incredibly divided right now. You got Team JT versus Team Petey, and it goes back and forth instead of all going towards the same goal, which is that, they should be working together to win a Stanley Cup. Now, obviously with JT Miller, there's a bit more smoke around his name based on the reporting that he almost sat out against the Edmonton Oilers on Saturday night because a trade with the New York Rangers was close. And if that truly is the case, you start to wonder if maybe this is more of a JT Miller versus Rick Tocchet rift. Maybe we'll do some more reporting on that on Locked On Canucks on a later episode. But again, with both players, they just haven't been anywhere near their peaks. And there's an argument that you're selling low on either guy. So the Canucks cannot be in a rush to make this deal, because I've said it time and time again, and everydayers know, the Canucks are more likely than not going to lose this trade. Now, when I think about the New Jersey Devils, and I know we'll get into it later, I mean, the New Jersey Devils have some pieces that could intrigue the Canucks in a deal. So, again, there could be a deal for one of those players, but it's just very, very rare in the NHL that you see a player of Miller or Pettersson's caliber traded, and the team trading away said player wins the deal.
Yeah, I mean, when looking at the Devils, they're running out of assets that can be used in a big-time deal. And I'm telling the Devils front office, be a little conservative when it comes to trading away your pieces, because I know the Devils discourse, and I'm no exception. We want to see the Devils hoist a Stanley Cup in the near future. But right now, they have hit a complete wall, and they've hit a new low. They lost their more recent games to the Philadelphia Flyers and Ottawa Senators, and now they are 2-6-3 in their past 11 games, and they've only racked up 7 out of 22 potential points. Now, at least they got those 7 points in an 11-game span. So at least they're walking away with something which is why they're not really spiraling out of the Metro. They're still third. They're still in a prime playoff position. But I think it's quite evident that a lot of the fan base wants Fitzy to either make a splashy move or just make some sort of move just to bolster the Devils just a little bit more, because this is a playoff team, but are they Stanley Cup contenders? I'm going to have to say no. They haven't proven to me that they can be a legitimate playoff threat, but obviously that's months and months away. So this leads into my next question. In your humble opinion, just your personal perspective, do you think Miller or Pettersson will be dealt, or at least one of them?
We'll get back to the conversation with myself and Trey Matthews from Locked On Devils in a second, but we got to pause here and shout at our friends over at FanDuel, baby. At FanDuel, okay? If you're placing bets on sports, the only place that you should be placing bets is on FanDuel, okay? Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get not 100, not 200, but $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app, they make it so easy, even I can do it, okay? The app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. All right, and looking at the NFL weekend ahead, the Commanders -5.5 against the Eagles. Man, oh man, how can you bet against Jaden Daniels now? Whether you're betting on NFL, NHL, or lawn bowling, just go visit FanDuel.com and join today to get started with $300 in bonus bets, and that's on FanDuel.com.
In your humble opinion, just your personal perspective, do you think Miller or Pettersson will be dealt, or at least one of them?
I think it's such a coin flip right now. I would lean towards no. I honestly, and there's so much smoke with JT Miller right now. You listen to every talk show in Vancouver, everyone's saying the trade's inevitable, it's going to happen. And so maybe I got my blinders on a bit, and maybe I'm refusing to believe it. But, you know, Alvin had his press conference yesterday, and he really doubled down on this team and gave them every excuse in the book, saying we've been injured and we've had a lot of go against us and blah, blah, blah. He wasn't really calling out those guys. He gave them every excuse for, you know, their subpar performance so far. And I think glass half full, the Canucks have had a lot go wrong. Miller's been out, Pettersson's been out, Hughes has been injured, Besser's been injured, Hronek's been injured, Demko's been injured. Everyone's been gone, and they're still a point out of a wild card spot. But you watch the team on a night-to-night basis, and they're one of the lowest shooting teams in the NHL. Their defense statistically has been fine, but they can be leaky at the worst of times. They struggle to move the puck. So, I mean, there is certainly an argument for trading one of those guys, but again, I think you got a pretty smart management team with Rutherford and Alvin, who again aren't afraid to make a move, but just the likelihood of winning that trade is so slim that I do have a hard time seeing it happening. Unless it is so untenable in that locker room that they got to make a switch, I think they stand pat.
Now, when looking at the Canucks in the Pacific Division, obviously there's a lot of good teams. The Golden Knights continue to be great. They have 62 points. Oilers, 61 points. Let me make this clear. At the time of this recording, which is Tuesday morning, so just putting that out there. Kings, 55 points. Flames, 51 points. And the Canucks have 50 points. They're middle of the pack, so they're not really where the Kraken are, but they're not exactly where the Kings are at either. They're like smack dab in the middle. So do you think the Canucks can still contend for a playoff position, or is that just too far gone?
Oh, I certainly think they contend for a playoff position. I mean, look at who they're competing with, right? It's the Calgary Flames, who many expected to be a bottom feeder. The Utah Hockey Club, who were, you know, a bit of a sexy pick to make the playoffs, but they're not scaring anybody necessarily. And then you got the St. Louis Blues. Like, there's not a lot of tough competition there. So I don't see why the Canucks can't sneak into a wild card spot. I think they are, again, they're a middle of the pack team right now, and when they should have been a Stanley Cup contender, but I certainly think playoffs are still on the horizon. And, you know, they could be one of those teams, and maybe I have my Canucks blue and green goggles on again here, but they could be one of those teams that, you know, if they get on a heater, they get into the 8th seed, the stars start clicking again, they're going to be a team that no one wants to really face.
Well, we'll see what happens. Like I said, I saw you guys in the playoffs last year and had to support Quinn Hughes, which, by the way, I just got to ask, just to entertain the thought, just humor me. any chance Quinn Hughes would be available in a deal? Because a lot of the Devils discourse, they want that fantasy, which is all three Hughes brothers on the same team. And I'm sure Jim and Ellen wouldn't mind that either. I know Hughes is the captain. He won the Norris Trophy just last year, but just humor me. Any chance of that happening?
Well, it's funny because in Vancouver we have the same dreams of getting all the Hughes brothers together, but I think it's an easier conversation in New Jersey since you got two of them and we only got one. But no, I say there is a 0% chance the Canucks trade Quinn Hughes, but man, oh man, it's gonna be dark for the Locked On Canucks listeners. You're Canucks every day, but if you want to give Devils fans a little slice of cherry pie here, if the Canucks start spiraling out of control, they're not winning hockey games. Quinn Hughes is about 18 months away from being able to sign an extension with the Vancouver Canucks. If at that time, say the Canucks suck for the rest of the season and suck next season, Quinn Hughes is such a competitive guy. I don't think he's going to want to play for a losing hockey team. That might be the time where there is some chatter or some talk about Quinn Hughes going to another organization. And of course, I think the Devils would be the front runner. But I want to believe in Vancouver because he is such a treat to watch. And I'll say this. I went to the Canucks and Flames game as a fan in Calgary on New Year's Eve, and I had a Flames fan beside me talk about how disappointed he was to not see Quinn Hughes and compared watching him to watching Connor McDavid. And, from a fan in another market to say that, it warmed my cold heart, Trey. It really did.
When I spoke to Connor McDavid, he had nothing but nice things to say about all three Hughes brothers. He said that they're all amazing, and the chances of all three of them playing on the same team, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I already knew the answer. I said there's no way the Canucks would trade their captain and also their reigning Norris Trophy winner to New Jersey just to appease a certain fan base. So I'm not delusional. And speaking of delusional, let's just talk about Pettersson or J.T. potentially being dealt to New Jersey. Now, my personal opinion is that I don't see the Canucks trading away Elias or J.T. just because it doesn't really make sense from a contract standpoint, in my opinion, because it's like Pettersson and Miller have a few years remaining on their respective deals. You don't have to make a move right now, but let's entertain it anyway. I call it silly season on my show. So let's talk some silly season. Elliot Friedman said that if one of them were to be dealt away, the Canucks would most likely ask for a center. What would your asking price be for Elias or JT?
Yeah, when I look at the Devils roster right now, and the tough thing is, the biggest area of weakness on the Canucks right now is a right shot defenseman, which is where New Jersey could come into play. And I think you're going to shake your head at me, obviously, as we get into this. But
let me be clear. The only reason I would shake my head is because this player might have a clause in place. So this player might have to waive that clause in order to go to Vancouver. But I'll hear you out.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, I'm talking about Simon Nemec for me. I'm curious who you were alluding to there.
But I thought you were going to go for someone even bigger, like Dougie Hamilton or something like that. I just said, unfortunately, Hamilton has a no movement clause.
So. Yeah, and I mean, obviously Miller does too, but different circumstances in Vancouver there. But no, I think with the Canucks, like you've seen them make these deals in the past, like when they traded Bo Horvat for a package of assets, and then they use those assets to acquire Phil Pronik, right? Defenseman in his mid-20s who can play with the team now. Simon Nemec, obviously a little bit younger than that, but obviously some pretty high potential as well. And coming off, I believe, a 5-point night it was in the AHL the other night. But the biggest weakness on the Canucks is on the right side of the defense. Like their defensive depth after Hughes and Hronek takes an absolute nosedive. Like when those two guys were injured, the Canucks defense was worse than the San Jose Sharks, like bar none. You had Forbort and Myers on your top pair. Carson Soucy struggled. Desharnais, Juleson. It's just been a dog's breakfast. But when I think about a potential deal for JT Miller or Elias Pettersson, I think a guy that Canucks would be interested in would be Simon Nemec. And then aside from that, I mean, the package that might get it started would be something like Nemec and Dawson Mercer. I know Dawson Mercer's been a bit hot and cold in New Jersey as well. 23 years old. Now he's making $4 million. Again, you're talking about superstar players, so it's a tough conversation because there's the argument that Canucks fans are valuing them too highly, but these are guys that both have had 100-point seasons within the past 2 years. So I think they should be highly valued, and that's why I think a trade's unlikely unless a team absolutely knocks out of the park. But you can tell me from a Devils perspective, like if it's, I'm talking more so JT Miller, I think, than Pettersson, but if it's like Nemec and Mercer as a part of the package coming back the other way, is that something that entices Devils fans?
So I actually talked about this on my show, and I just don't think it's going to work financially for Pettersson since, once again, he's being paid annually $11.6 million, which means he'll be making more money than Jack Hughes and also Timo Meier. So I don't know how that would work financially, especially when you have to consider Luke Hughes. He's going to need a new contract at the end of this season. Jonathan Kovacevic, who's really come alive with New Jersey, he's going to need a new contract. There's all sorts of factors that come into play here. And when you name Dawson Mercer and also Shimo Nemec, you just named two tradable assets for New Jersey. At least, like, when we're talking about a splashy move, I guarantee you one or those two names will be brought up in discussions. Now, would Fitzy actually go through with it? I don't really know because, like I said, I think the Devils are running dangerously low when it comes to valuable assets that could be used in a deal, because Alexander Holtz is now gone. Akira Schmid is gone. Fabian Zetterlund is now gone. You're trading away young assets that you could package together in a deal. And this is something I actually have not talked about on my show yet. It's interesting that you brought up Nemec because recently he's seen his name in the headlines. Not only is he an AHL All-Star, but he spoke to a reporter. In his fairness, this might have gotten lost in translation because the reporter hails from a different country. I'm not sure which one, but basically it translated to like Nemec said it's too early to ask for a trade, but if certain things head the way that they're heading, then maybe he would. Now, like I said, it might have gotten lost in translation. And because, different languages, they use different sentence structures. So we don't really know if he was like expressing frustration, but maybe just entertaining a thought. I don't really know. But I can understand why Nemec might be a little frustrated because this is his second year in the NHL, but yet he is in the AHL. And unfortunately, there's a log jam of defensemen right in front of him because Dougie Hamilton, he's here long-term. Brett Pesce, he's here long-term. Brendan Dillon, he's here for 3 seasons. Siegenthaler is signed long-term. Luke Hughes, more likely than not, barring anything catastrophic happening, he'll be here long-term. Kovacevic might be here long-term because Fitzy has come out and said that he's trying to work on an extension with Kovacevic. So honestly, there might not be any room for Nemec in the near future. And if he is brought up to the NHL, more likely than not, he's going to be a healthy scratch. So I think that's interesting that that Nemec came out and said that he might look at a trade or something like that. But I'm taking that with a grain of salt. But he is an AHL All-Star. I can't take that away from him. He had a big 5-point performance not too long ago. I think Nemec would be utilized in a quote-unquote splashy deal. And then for Mercer, he's one of the few players on the Devils roster that doesn't have a clause in place. Like he doesn't have a no movement clause. He doesn't have a no trade clause. He doesn't have a modified no trade clause. And it sort of checks out as to what Elliot Friedman said recently, which is the Canucks might ask for a center in return for one of those players. And honestly, Mercer's a center, so you might get Dawson Mercer. You would get a project with Mercer because he's been up and down a little bit, but he plays in all the games. He's never been a healthy scratch. He's never been injured. So who knows what might happen.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious, maybe just to give Canucks fans a bit more of a scouting report on Dawson Mercer. I mean, now he's been in the NHL for 4 seasons now. This is 4th season. A career high of 27 goals, 56 points back in 22-23, but seems like he's kind of been on a bit of a downward trajectory, at least in terms of the counting stats since then. And, was playing center. Now he's mainly on the wing. So yeah, maybe give Canucks fans a bit of the pros and cons of a guy like Dawson Mercer, who's 23 years old right now.
So for Dawson Mercer, you're going to get an absolute dog. That's why we call him Merce Dog. The thing about Mercer is that he's not afraid to collect the loose change out in front. He plays in all the games, which means like, even though he's struggling, he's still efficient because, like I said, he's never missed time due to injury. He's never been a healthy scratch. He is the Iron Man on this Devils team. And going back to his career highs, that was during the 2022-2023 season. A fact about that is that he got off to a slow start, but he really picked it up as the season progressed, and he was on the same line as Nico Hischier and also Tomas Tatar, which is why I think Tatar saw more success a couple years ago, because Hischier is a great two-way player, and he can make the players around him better. Mercer was, I would say, the main scorer on that line because Hischier focuses more on offense, but obviously he has to focus a lot on defense as well. And Hischier's first instinct is to pass the puck more times than not. It's sort of changed this time around, but this season specifically. But I think Mercer, he has a lot of untapped potential, and I think Fitzy still believes in him. I don't really know. We'll see if his name is brought up in more trade discussions. But for Mercer, yeah, he's a great player. I don't think he's been put in the proper situation to succeed. And unfortunately, the Devils just have a lot of other good scoring options.
Yeah, I think that's a good rundown on Dawson Mercer. And in Vancouver, seems like there are some small parallels to Nils Höglander as well, who I believe might be a year older than Dawson Mercer, but they're both in that 23, 24 range. So Dawson Mercer, 1 year younger, part of that 2020 draft. Nils Höglander from 2019. Obviously, Nils Höglander has struggled immensely this season, but 24 even strength goals last year. Also a guy who has, that dog on a bone mentality, and a guy who has been nowhere near his career heights this season either for the Vancouver Canucks. All right, back to the conversation with Trey Matthews from Locked On Devils in a moment. But we got to pause here and shout at our friends over at SelectQuote, okay? SelectQuote, they are the only place that you should be getting your life insurance from to protect your family's legacy, baby. Or just protect your own goddamn legacy, okay? SelectQuote, they know that in sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Stanley Cup Finals. The same goes for life. You got to have a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote that can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy peasy lemon squeezy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of North America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped 2 million customers find $700 billion of coverage. And if you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage up to $5 million. No medical exam required, which means no finger up the you-know-what, unless that's what you want. Get the right life insurance for you for less at SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL. Go to SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL today to get started. That's SelectQuote.com/LockedOnNHL. SelectQuote. They shop and you save. Trey, maybe let's give the listeners a little deal here, and we can go back and forth in a bit over the last few minutes here on Locked On Canucks, Locked On Devils. Love a good crossover here on Locked On. But for JT Miller, it seems like a potential deal could be Miller for Simo Nemec, Dawson Mercer. I know this guy's got a no trade, but maybe he'd waive Eric Halla as a cap dump to make the numbers work.
Not happening. No, he's not.
Halla's not going.
There's no way he's
Really?
going to waive his no trade clause. Here's the thing about Halla. The reason he wanted that no trade clause is because Halla has bounced around the league. He's now, albeit he's played on playoff caliber teams. He's only missed the playoffs twice in his career. He missed it last year because the Devils weren't that good. And then he missed it at one point when he was playing with the Vegas Golden Knights. But that Golden Knights team still made the playoffs. He personally missed the playoffs due to injury. Halla wants that no trade clause just for stability, because he even admitted he wasn't really too fond of the fact that he was traded from Boston to New Jersey, but he grew to love it, and he loved the guys in the locker room. There is no way Halla is waiving his no trade clause. He wants to stay in New Jersey, and for the time being, Halla will leave New Jersey when Halla wants to leave New Jersey.
Interesting. All right. I mean, yeah, you look at the Devils cap sheet here in terms of balancing the numbers, and you have Stefan Nason with a 10-team no trade list making
not happening.
7. You don't think the Canucks will be on a 10-team list?
No way.
I know the Devils just signed in the offseason another guy that's bounced around there.
Yes, that's a big thing too, and he has a young family that he's talked about too, and he loved New Jersey, and New Jersey in his first tenure gave him a chance. And ever since then, he was bouncing around the league, including the AHL with the Chicago Wolves. Then he had to prove himself on the Carolina Hurricanes. And again, it's about stability for Stefan Noesen, and he's been really good for New Jersey. He adds more sandpaper, great net front presence. I would say it's one of the best in the NHL. I'm sorry, Stefan Noesen, not happening.
Yeah, it's funny. Stefan Noesen, he's only a few points behind JT Miller this season, albeit JT Miller has missed about 10 games there. But yeah, in terms of balancing the numbers, that would be the struggle for the Devils and the Canucks. I mean, it looks like the Devils right now have about $1.9 million in cap space. So unless a guy goes to LTIR.
Don't tell me that. Yeah.
1.9?
Yeah, it's the money is not really frugal right now, if that makes sense. Like I said, if they want to trade for Pettersson or Miller, they're gonna have to get creative. But I think Miller's the more likely option of the two, just because Pettersson is being paid almost $12 million.
Yeah, I mean, the only way I see a Pettersson trade happening is if you almost got to have a guy like Timo Meier in there, right? It's like a two struggling stars in a swap kind of deal. And I'm not sure if the Canucks will be incredibly into that either, to be honest. But I think that's the only way it happens. I know Timo Meier has been underwhelming, I think it's safe to say, since coming to the Devils. So yeah, that's the only way I see really a trade like that happening. And that might be one of the only other options for the Devils if this becomes like a big NHL 25 GM type of deal.
Wait, did you say underwhelming a little bit?
Yeah.
I would respectfully disagree. I don't think he's been underwhelming. Okay. I think he's been doing what he's supposed to do. Like, Timo Meier's not a point per game player. That's not his job. He's a big power forward who's capable of scoring. And he has 31 points in 48 game appearances. And the most points he's had in a single season where he was almost a point per game player was during the 2021-2022 season, 77 game appearances with the Sharks, 76 points. Honestly, I think Meier has been what he's been advertised, which is a big power forward who adds more physicality, and he's capable of scoring. But it really depends on who you ask on the Devils discourse. For me personally, I think Meier is doing what he's supposed to do.
Okay, no, that's fair. I know. Again, you see a guy making 8.8 and not hitting the heights that he hit in San Jose. I think that's part of it. Again, it's an interesting world we live in now where you know what all these guys make. That wasn't the case, obviously, 20 years ago.
I think the reason is because you are right. Like, why is he making that sort of money? It's because if the Devils didn't offer him the money, you can best believe there would be another team banging on the door for Timo Meier, because players of his body frame who are capable of scoring, they don't grow on trees. And Meier not scoring the way he did in San Jose, well, yeah, I would agree to that, because Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, they take priority over Meier when it comes to scoring. But I think Meier has been what he's been advertised, and some of the stuff he does won't show up on the score sheet. And I remember a game of not too long ago, he's racking up the blocks, he's racking up the hits. That's what he's supposed to do, be a big power forward.
Yeah, no, that's a fair assessment of Timo Meier, and hey, that's why you got to listen to Locked On Devils, because Trey Matthews, you're the expert, buddy. Maybe one last final question for me as we wrap up here on the crossover here of Locked On Canucks, Locked On Devils.
We couldn't get a deal in place, at least something that works by cap space financially.
Do you got any other suggestions for you, Trey?
Well, it's a tough one. It's just a tough one because there's just so many Devils players with clauses. Could Curtis Lazar work out? Maybe. Or
yeah, I mean the Canucks also traded him away. A season ago, so I have a hard time seeing that. I mean,
I was gonna say want to reunite with Lazar. I don't know. Nathan Bastian being paid $1.35 million, unrestricted free agent after this season. Tomas Tatar, $1.8 million. Curtis McDermott, he has a 3-year deal. I don't know why he has a 3-year deal, but he's being paid annually $1.15 million annually, ?
Yeah. And you know what, again, looking at the Devils cap sheet, because if it is Miller's $8 million for Mercer and another player, you're still talking about, still being short on the cap. I guess you could bury guys in the minors or get creative, but that's what you really needed to be closer to dollar in, dollar out, or at least $6 million out for the Devils and $8 million in, $8 million in from JT Miller. So it's a tough one.
Unfortunately, guys, We couldn't come to a deal, and I think that's exactly how it's going to go down if the Devils and Canucks try to negotiate something for Miller. It's not going to happen, in my opinion. I think Miller and Pettersson will stay put in Vancouver. Still want to entertain the thought, but I'm sorry, Trevor. What were you going to ask me?
Oh, I think last question for me, Trey, is do you think there would be any extra urgency from the Devils, say if their metropolitan counterparts are trying to acquire JT Miller, right? I mean, Carolina has been in the rumors. New York, the Rangers have been in the rumors, obviously, too. Do you think that would, I know Tom Fitzgerald, he said it, he wants that extra oomph in his lineup. JT Miller brings that oomph. But in your opinion, would there be any extra motivation to acquire a guy like Miller if, say, the Rangers and the Hurricanes are the two biggest teams after his services?
There was a trade in place for Miller, right? And it fell through.
For the Rangers, reportedly, yes.
Reportedly. Okay. Well, I'm going to say no. It's because the reason being is like if Pettersson and Miller are dealt to New Jersey, we just did our discussion, which is you're going to have to gut one of your core players. Then I think for the Devils is like, look, they do need to go out and make a move. Now, does it have to be for Pettersson or Miller? I'm going to say no, not really, because I always say you could find cheaper options elsewhere. Like people wanted the Devils to get Brady Tkachuk over the summer. And I said, that's not going to happen. If the Senators even entertain the thought of trading away Tkachuk, you're going to be at the Senators' mercy, which means you're going to have to give up an arm and a leg because you would be guaranteed a few seasons of Tkachuk. So, and I said, you can find physicality elsewhere. And the Devils did. They got Dylan, they got Nason, they got Carter. All three players, not really that expensive in the grand scheme of things. So when it comes to Pettersson and Miller, yes, the Devils do need more scoring. But remember, they need bottom six scoring. They don't need more top six scoring because the reality of it is if you trade for someone like Miller, he's going to be on the same line as Jack Hughes. You move Andre Palat to the bottom six. What changes? Your top six is still stacked. Your bottom six is not going to produce all that much. And if you remove Palat from the Bratt and Hughes line, Palat's just going to get buried. It's not going to work out. So my thing is look, I would love to have JT or Elias on this roster. They're both really good players. And I'm sure if the Canucks decide to move on from them, they'll make a team really lucky. But I just don't think it's going to happen in New Jersey.
Yeah, best thing that can happen for Canucks fans is that Miller and Pettersson figure the F out and get back to being what they were for this team 12 plus months ago. Trey, this is great, man. You're doing great work over there at Locked On Devils. Make sure you go check out Trey. If and when the Canucks get eliminated and the Devils are still rocking and rolling in the playoffs, make sure you go check out Trey on Locked On Devils wherever you listen to podcasts.
Thanks so much. And Trevor, where can my audience find you at?
Yeah, you can find us on YouTube, of course, at Locked On Canucks. I mean, I always tell outside listeners that, sports is all about escapism, and there's nothing like escapism than listening to talk about the Vancouver Canucks, because for better or for worse, we tend to be one of the most in the news teams in the NHL. Never a dull moment in Vancouver. So you can find us on YouTube wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find me on Twitter at Trev Beggs. You can find my co-host doing 80% of the work on the show, Kyle Bowen. He's on Instagram at Kyle Bowen, BHAWAN.
Well, Trevor, this was a lot of fun. And like I do to close out every episode, continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day in New Jersey and also Vancouver. Go Devils. And on Trevor's side of things, go Canucks. I will catch you in the next episode of Locked On Devils. Trevor will catch you in the next episode of Locked On Canucks. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.
Your Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.